Hi, welcome to Better Minneapolis podcast. Today I'm here with Cathy Abene, who is currently the District 6 Commissioner and the Park Board President. Hello.
Hello, Terry.
Any other details you would like to add to that introduction about yourself?
Well, I guess I can just say a little bit. You can say Abene or Abene, as you said, but
okay.
It's a tricky name. People struggle with it, so Abene's okay. And I've been
as long as they vote for you, right? That's,
yes.
Call it however they want.
Yeah, right. Just right. That's right. And I've been the District 6 Commissioner since 2022. And I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to give more background information or whatever, but, I just really am happy to be here talking with you today. I think what you're doing is great.
Good.
Yeah.
So, and then how long have you been president? Because it was Meg Forney,
Yep.
And then I feel like I read this great letter that she wrote about you when you became president. And how does that work? Do the other commissioners vote on electing you, or do you just get promoted? What happens?
Yep. On the first meeting of a new calendar year, there's that's the annual meeting, and that's where committee assignments are made by the president, but the president is selected by the commissioners. So is the vice president. So you have to win the majority of votes, and so I was vice president for all of 24 and part of 23, and after we had a commissioner leave the board. Then I put my name in the hat for running for being the president in this calendar year, and I was supported. I think probably it makes sense that the president switch up a little bit on the board.
Mm-hmm. And what motivated you this go around?
I think former President Forney, Commissioner Forney, I think she had done a really good job, and I think I think she was ready also to step down from that role, because it's actually a bit of a demanding role. It's more of a time commitment and things like that. So since I had been serving as Vice President, and also I served on the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Okay, that's now changed, right? You're now.
I am on that. Yeah, I get
okay.
all the.
So do you have does Park Board have 2 spots?
We have 1 spot there. I've been on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. This is my 3rd year. I wasn't on it in my 1st year, so I get all the nerdy assignments.
Okay.
But, I feel pretty good about that. I mean, not all 9 commissioners get along all the time, but in general, I would say we've had a collegial board, and I think that's helped us be more productive.
And when you're not kind of putting all your effort into the park board, you have another job, correct?
That's right. I have a full-time day job, as do most commissioners, except for a couple. So that's actually, and we have no staff, dedicated staff at the organization. So it's a real, for me, it's a real labor of love. It's
your
public
day job
service.
Is a professor, right?
No, I'm not a professor.
Okay.
No.
Thank you for correcting that.
Yes, I've even had people think I have a PhD. Now, I swear it's because I work at the university. So
right.
I'm always quick to say I don't work in the academic part or the research part. I work in the operations part. So the university is like a city, and we have a lot of infrastructure. So I'm a water resources engineer.
I knew that.
Yes, and I manage infrastructure for the Twin Cities campus. But we also have regulatory requirements that are required to be followed around stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff is a good way to say it, and also really wetlands, following the Wetland Conservation Act and other clean water laws. And so the university owns 58,000 acres of land in the state of Minnesota. So I have a role in all of those locations. In fact, I was just looking at something at our Cedar Creek site in East Bethel. I've never been there, but I was looking at some drawings. Mm-hmm. So it's an expansive role, and I've held it it's going on 18 years at the university. And I think when I retire from there, because I think that's what's going to happen if I continue to serve on the park board, I just wouldn't have the bandwidth to switch. I think on reflection, I'll feel really lucky that I had my career at the University of Minnesota.
Sure.
Yeah.
What
an interesting place to work. So,
well, it seems like good I mean, especially as a water engineer, good, and operations, good preparation for the park board, right? Because you obviously in the park board deal with a lot of stormwater issues.
That's right. And that's kind of even a drilled down level. The way I view it is I work for a large public landowner, and I've also worked for the city of Seattle for a few years, moved out there with the family during my midlife crisis. It's real. Came back. But also I worked for Hennepin County Transportation. So working for large public entities, public landowners, like the park board, there are so many things that are similar. And so I find myself when I'm at work or doing park board work, having to root around in my head a little bit so I don't say university when I mean park board and the other way around, because there's just so many things that are similar about the work. So it was my experiment to say, would my background be valuable as a commissioner? And I feel that I've answered the question personally to say it's helped me a great deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are, you're in District 6. What are some of the big issues in your district, big parks? I mean, I know you vote on, the entire park system, but are there anything that your neighbors, people in District 6 are particularly concerned about or interested in?
Yeah. Most people are pretty quiet about the parks, honestly. And, really quiet about it, probably maybe a little bit to a fault. They kind of forget that there's a park board. I think this is true for city government as well. If you look at, recently I was watching one of the public hearings for the city budget, because I'm on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and I was, sitting at my desk. I'm like, I'll turn this on while I'm working. And, what you hear at the doors is very different from what you hear who's showing up to meetings to speak. So it's just a completely different experience. So,
right, give an example. What do you mean
well,
by
you hear from people that have a particular cause or interest that they're trying to advance. Those are the people who often will show up or do show up. But people who, people don't show up to say, oh, I think it's great. You guys have been doing a great job mowing the grass, But when you door knock...
Who are those people?
The majority of them, honestly.
All right.
I mean, so when you door knock, it's really interesting. And I honestly think it would be, I was just thinking this morning, gosh, I should go door knock in Northeast with one of the Northeast candidates. I should door knock in North, although I don't know how much Charles is door knocking up there because he's unopposed and he'll be great there. But just to hear if the issues are the same. But door after door after door, you hear about the same things. And this was true when I ran last time. And I'll just digress for a second. The other thing that I've really noticed is that the sentiments and priorities have changed a little bit. So when I door knocked in 21, there were concerns about public safety. Those fell more toward the city, and occasionally I'd be door knocking with a city candidate, and you'd hear a lot about that. But with parks, there were these almost litmus tests at the doors. The park board, the previous board, had done something with the state troopers and not allowing them to use the bathrooms in the middle of the night in the park building, and the mayor ended up vetoing it, if you remember. Oh man, was that unpopular. The other thing was any attempts to close parkways to cars. That was extremely unpopular, as were the encampments, even under permit, to be clear. And so those aren't my issues necessarily, but those are what I heard. This time, what I'm hearing is really interesting, because I'm hearing everybody says no one seems angry like they were in 21, and I'm hearing almost 100%. And I've talked to hundreds of people, maybe into the thousands now. Oh, we love our parks. Oh, we love the parks, right? And then this one really gets me. I love it. You guys are doing a good job. Like, you know how people are? They say the same things over and over. Yeah. And so I've let that organization know. So when they say you guys are doing a good job, they don't mean the commissioners, right? They mean the organization. You guys are doing a good job.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's great.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So again, people that think that things are fine aren't showing up to public meetings, right? And I think the vast majority of people, when it comes to the parks, think the organization is doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, and the parks just won an award. That was a big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Huge. It's the gold medal award. I mean, I don't fully understand it because I'm not a park professional, but it's an operational award. So in addition to the other one we get, so that's another thing I like to talk to people about, like, we have this amazing park system. We know it. We have one of the best urban park systems in the country. That's settled science.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we have some of the best park professionals that work for us as citizens.
Well, I just learned from my previous interview on the park board that we're one of like 2 independent park boards. I didn't realize that. I thought it was more common.
Yeah, I don't think that that's accurate. I think that it depends. Like, I think, we don't see, we live in Hennepin County, but we don't get to vote for the Three Rivers district, but they have elected people. So it kind of probably depends. And then I think the state of Illinois is loaded with elected park boards.
Okay.
So, maybe there's a distinction when it's more of an urban system, but I don't know. I think the city of Chicago had an elected park board and then pivoted away from that. So, but I know that there are lots and lots of, I believe, park boards in the country.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so you're running again. You've been outdoor knocking.
Yep.
What are some of the priorities that you tell your neighbors and whatnot that why you're running again?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm going to get back to the point about the park professionals. So again, you and I are citizens of Minneapolis, and I'm a citizen of Minneapolis. I just happen to be the one that huddles with the other, 70,000 people that I represent, roughly, and we sort of figure out what we're going to say, and we go back to the organization, and we give guidance and direction, right? And so, we are lucky that we have this amazing system with these amazing professionals, and that I think one of the most important things that we can do as citizens is recognize how critical that is to our city in every single way, and the quality of all of our lives, and that we should send thoughtful people to manage that system or steward that system. So one of the things I say is, let's make sure we elect a board that will be mission focused and listen to their constituents and, do some work, because it's not, you don't just get to sit there in a meeting and say yay or nay, and make thoughtful, informed decisions.
So maybe tell me a little bit, what does that mean, mission focus? So if there's a mission of the park board, what is it in your mind?
I can't recite it, but it's really a nice mission. So when you get a chance, I know, Terry, you're...
But to you personally?
Okay. Right, okay. I was being very literal there. Sorry, I'm an engineer. I think it's basically parks and recreation. And it centers people, plants, and animals, right? And so it also centers recreation and the natural environment. It also centers dismantling, that's the word that's used, which was kind of trendy when it was added, past inequities, which is a good thing. And I'd like to see us also prevent future inequities. And I see ways in which the park system processes and decision-making is set up to do just that.
So what does that mean in terms of the parks?
Yep.
Like certain groups don't have access, or what does inequity mean?
It really means investment. And I think that we need to be clear about what that means in Minneapolis. So, for example, 99% of people can walk to a park in 10 minutes or less. So we really do have a widespread distributed park system. But I do believe, of course, as we know, there were areas that were historically underinvested, and there might have been a lot of reasons for that. Even if you look back to, I think one of the areas of Minneapolis that was maybe most underserved was Northeast, and it had to probably do with the fact that that was the blue-collar part of town. And when they would build parks back, I don't know what the era was, but into the 20th century, they would do a special assessment for properties that would receive a benefit from a park improvement. And so that, I think, made it harder to do it in areas where there were lower income households. So anyway, but there are other examples as well. I mean, I could, I've thought a lot about this, and I've just learned so much, but, not to go too deeply into this topic, but there were as we've moved into centralized registration for sports programming, there are these standalone groups that had formed, and they were embedded for 40 years doing essentially their own recruitment for teams and things like that. They were these outside teams, and many of them were in North Minneapolis. And so I believe that the reason those groups formed in the first place was to fill a big gap. So maybe there was more emphasis looking at filling teams in other parts of the city, lower priority parts of the city. So we know there are ways in which the system has inequities that were built in, and so we can change that, and the park board has changed that with its investment strategy. So,
well, I know when they centralized that registration,
yeah.
it was it drove us crazy because it was just navigating another new portal and not hearing back or knowing what team we were going to be on. It definitely caused some confusion, but. And at the time, we didn't understand really why it necessarily was being done, but that helps to understand it more. One way that I hear in terms of solving for certain inequities is North Commons Park, the new one, right?
Yeah.
What I'm assuming you support the build out of that. I mean, that was a long time coming, I understand. What are your thoughts on it? What's your vision for it when it's done?
Well, my vision is that the community. So the best way for me to think about it is the investment is, I'll say, ostentatious in that location, and the discussions with the community started before I was a commissioner, and the community said. I'm paraphrasing, but we want something ostentatious here, and they're getting it. And so I think just being able to deliver that back to the community is critical. And there are many partners that are involved in that from the community side, and then also other governmental layers of government or levels of government, and even philanthropic partners. So my thing is, I don't have any interest in. I want to support the things that are working. And I haven't tried to disrupt certain things that are in the pipeline. So again, that started before I was a commissioner. But yeah, let's deliver it. And I think it'll be delivered in this next term. I mean,
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's under construction right now. So in a big way. So we approved many contracts for it at every meeting.
So let's talk a little bit about funding and contracts and how does the city or how does the parks go about getting its funding? You put in your own request. They're going through it right now, I assume, for funding for the parks. And then, as you mentioned, something like North Commons isn't just funded by the park board. It seems like there's a whole group of different agencies involved. But maybe start with how you get your funding and what the current request is and what's covered in it.
Okay. So I think a little background, maybe just a little bit, is helpful. So this is the way the park board does it is the way that government does it. It's not unique. Mm-hmm. There's the day-to-day operational dollars, and then there are the capital dollars, and those are different. So some people will say, well, instead of building that thing there, why don't you just take that and open the rec centers more hours or whatever. Well, you can't do that. So you can't mix those pools of money. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. So you have you have
one budget for capital improvements and one budget for labor or
labor. So the rec center workers, the people that mow to take care of the grounds and the land and all of that. That's day-to-day operations. Those are your operations dollars versus your capital improvement dollars. This is extremely normal. This is how every government entity that I'm aware of does it.
Okay.
And you can't mix it, right? You can't mix it.
Is that by?
And the reason is when you pursue capital dollars, they're one-time dollars. They're not going to be recurring dollars, and you pursue them for specific requests.
So
This is really important because people don't understand this.
So you put in how much you want to the BET, right?
Okay.
And is it already specified in that request how much is for capital improvements, how much is for day-to-day operations or whatever? I mean, when you say you can't divide up these different buckets, who's making that decision? Is it the park board yourself, or is it the BET, or who's...
No, I think it has to do with the way in which these dollars are allowed to be spent, and it's not just Minnesota. Like, this is what it was like in Seattle as well, in Washington. So when I worked there, so the BET does approve bonding, but so bonding, when bonding dollars flow to capital type work. Capital work means new or major maintenance, right? If you were when you rebuild a street, that's not a brand new street, is it? But it's basically a renewal of the street. So the BET does bonding, but forget that. Put that aside, because we get also the state bonds for us, okay? There's a lot, and the city bonds for us, well, that would be through the BET. But then there's the main thing that the BET does, or the thing that is the most contentious, is the BET approves the maximum tax levy. These are property tax increases or not. Those are operating dollars. So the park board, so really set aside capital projects, set aside all the park improvements, set aside trail major maintenance, set aside North Commons, all of it. And now we're talking about operations. That's rec center hours. That's rec center programming, some of which is, we get fees for, but that's, mowing the grass, repairing the trails. That's porta potties, right? That's cleaning the rec centers. I mean, I could go on and on. Think of all the park workers.
Maybe before we do that.
Okay.
Why is this important for people to know in terms of this election, right? Is there any difference between candidates over how they feel like budgeting should be done, or? Well,
I think I've seen that there is one candidate that doesn't really understand the difference, and I mean, I don't fault him for it. He's not a current park commissioner, but he doesn't. He thinks that there's a capital project that should not happen so that all that money could go into maintenance. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
So it really does matter. I mean, but I mean, but does everybody need a lesson in civics, or is there in order just to... Yes, I mean,
we do, including myself, for sure.
That's true.
And
okay.
I would say that, most people, I mean, you clearly, being on the BET and being board president, have a great understanding of these different buckets of money and how it all, most of us don't. I mean, I fall into that, like, if something isn't getting done, I'm just like, why? They seem to have the money. Why isn't it getting done? And I, like most people, aren't going to get into the weeds of like, well, at the last budget meeting, they only had X dollars in this line item. We just, I don't know. I mean, and there's limited time, I guess. So I'm asking you to translate, I guess. So
I'm trying to.
So we have one big capital project, which is the North Commons. Mm-hmm. I think maybe that's where we started down that road. Are there other big capital projects that have been budgeted for that people would be interested to know about?
Yes, and the BET probably has almost, I think, zero role with the North Commons, basically. So I think we should come back to the operating dollars or the tax levy. I think we should come back to that. But yes, we have something called NPP 20. So that is neighborhood park improvements. That was done by, I think, 2 boards ago, and it was smart. What they did is they went to the city and they said, will you give the park board, Minneapolis, will you give the park board about $15-16 million a year so that we can have money to reinvest strategically and planfully back into neighborhood parks? Now, Terry, a neighborhood park is different than a regional park. Chain of Lakes Regional Park, Minnehaha Falls Regional Park, the Creek, Theodore Wirth Regional Parks. Neighborhood parks are the ones by your house. Okay. There was no money.
But they're all part of the Minneapolis park system.
Yep. But there was no money for these neighborhood parks. It used to be maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, maybe 12. The park board would get about $2 million in capital a year. That's why some of the rec centers look so shabby and charming, right? Charmingly shabby. But we have rec centers that don't have air conditioning. I mean, they're way behind. We have patchwork quilt roofs in some locations. It's because there was no money. So what the park board did a little while back, the previous superintendent said we need to be more planful and strategic and pursue dollars. So that's when they began doing all the community advisory committee work. Those are the CACs, right? And they went out to the community, and one by one they developed community-driven capital improvement plans, or long-range plans, for all the whole park system. And so those could go on the shelf. And this board, we only approved 2 of them, I think, 2 or 3, because it's been done. Now, for government can't just say, give us the money, we'll spend it. You need to say what you're going to spend it on when you're pursuing these capital dollars. Well, we have this many roofs, or we want to put an addition on North Commons, or we need to replace the water park or the pool or whatever. So the park board has a very, very transparent and robust capital improvement plan that goes out over a 20-year period for the neighborhood parks, and we have it for regional as well. Does this make sense? No? Too wonky?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I guess the more I've learned about the parks, the more I realize it's pretty complicated.
It is complicated.
So
Yep.
let me see if I've got it right. There's you call them the Community Advisory Committee, which is the CAC. A few 10 years back or whatever, they began working on a long-term plan to help with the neighborhood parks.
Yes.
Right? Which is separate from the more regional, bigger parks. And because they were, not being funded adequately, and some of them were lagging behind in maintenance. And so those plans are in place, and it sounds like they guide your requests.
That's right.
To the city for how much money you need each year.
Yes.
To a certain extent.
Yes, it's kind of fixed, but yes.
Okay, and then that money comes in, and I'm guessing you spend it.
That's right. And if you're kind of a nerd for this stuff, you could sign up. I would recommend signing up for the city's RFP notifications, especially as you move more into the construction season in the spring and summer. Park board project. The park board has an excellent plan to roll out the whole improvement plan every year. That's not nothing. And it's transparent. You can go online and see a Power BI tool to see how they're planning on spending the money. So through that, we get about $16 million a year from the city for the neighborhood parks. We have other revenue sources for the regional parks that are more state-driven. But and then the city can choose however they want to fund it. They can bond for those things. In that case, the BET will approve the bonds, but they might use other funds for the money. But it sits at around, we just got the next 5-year increase, I think it's a 4% increase. So we're sitting right around $16 million a year. And I think, as a person that manages a capital budget and an operating budget, I think the park board does a really good job spending their capital money. They're thrifty.
And so how is it different from, that's the capital budget, but I think where a lot of people interact with the parks is around, say, youth programming or child care or the sports teams. Is that the day-to-day budget?
Yep, that's the operating budget. So that goes back to our tax levy. So let's talk about that for just a minute. So basically, the operating budget is mostly staff because that's the expense. I mean, there's equipment and things like that, but it's mostly paying people. We do get some revenues back from some of the things that we do, but we're highly dependent on property taxes. But if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. You can just walk into a park, and I bet if you're like most people, you walk into them all the time. They're wide open. They're ready to go. You can go into a building. So you're paying for that. Go and look at how much you're paying on your property tax bill. You're essentially paying to go to those parks, to be able to access those parks freely. And that money pays for the operations of the parks. It also pays like the heating of the buildings, all of that stuff. It pays for, you know, it pays for the commissioners, it pays for the leadership team, it pays for the organization. And we're very dependent on it. So it funds 80% of our general fund budget. And that amount is, we got about $94 million in property taxes, I think is what we're slated to get next year. The city is much less dependent. Their general fund, so they have like a $2 billion budget nearly, but their general fund budget is more like $360 million. So not even half of their total budget. And that's because they have the utilities, for example. So they have something like, you know, you pay your utility bill, those are enterprises. You have something like $150 million a year probably right there between water, sewer, and stormwater. I'm guessing, I don't know. But you're at about 360 for their operating budget, and 57% of that is property taxes. So that's the thing that the BET does. The BET approves that amount for the city's general fund and the amount for the park board that we're going to get out of our tax levy. And it could be zero, it could be whatever.
And so, what are your priorities for this? I think I got kind of lost thinking about, you know, all these different buckets of money, but I want to make sure I'm understanding, like, are there particular things about the parks that you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah.
And what,
Yeah, I think that the organization, I think, is really in good shape in a lot of ways. I think that the superintendent and his team, I think they're really incredible and strong. You know, again, we have the best park professionals in the country. He has a really good vision for youth, for example. So, you know, the park board really has pulled out of where it was after the recession, and I think it's kind of plateauing, and I think that's fine. What I would like to see is that we continue to do things in balance. We're going to continue to emphasize and prioritize youth, but this current board has done some excellent work around natural resources, and I'd like to see us keep working on those environmental pieces. We're going to need those. We need those for our adaptation strategy, for climate change and things like that. So how do we move forward in balance? And then also, I think one of the things, you know, you can maybe tell by talking to me, I kind of think more about the systems of things, and I'd like to, in the next term, really figure out ways in which we can look at the expensiveness of our system. So not only potentially new revenue streams, but maybe are there things that we should be taking offline? And I'm not saying selling land or anything like that, but I think we could streamline maybe some of the some things. Maybe turn more areas. I know they want to turn more areas over to no-mow areas, for example, and that's a small thing overall. But I think we want to start looking really at the sustainability of the system for all of us to afford. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so, what are some of those possible new revenue streams?
Yeah, I think that we are looking at new revenue streams, and some of them might be somewhat small. We'll see. We're actually going to deploy some. I think you'll see some in this final budget at the end of this year. Maybe some more minor advertising in the parks. I'm picturing it on like fencing for ball fields and things like that. But
no billboards, right?
No, I really don't want a billboard. Once you do something like that, even though it sounds like it potentially is a big ticket item that you know it could generate a decent amount of revenue for the organization, I think it would be a mistake. You can't unbillboard once you billboard, right? They're talking about kind of like a mobile, like a beer garden truck or something like that. So whatever, these different creative strategies. I think some of the things the current board did is we've actually increased our, we've actually created an emphasis around urban stormwater runoff because it lands in the parks. And this stuff is so wonky, but man, I feel so proud of this work. We pulled all of our funded positions out of the general fund. that really focused on water quality, and we've really focused on monitoring and education, which is appropriate, and I could go into some great depth on that. But we're expanding the team to also just look at build a capital investment plan around water quality specifically. That's a big deal.
Well, it is because this past summer, I mean, and this has been happening for multiple summers, there's having to close beaches.
And that's what we can focus on as a goal. So we pulled it out of general fund. We're expanding the team, and you pay for it now on your utility bill. So yes, you are still paying for it, but you're paying something like 40 cents a month. And and then the larger commercial entities in the city that generate more runoff, so from big urban parking lots and things like that, they're paying more because it all lands in the water bodies in the city. So I'm really excited about something like that we've done. We also got we worked with the city to increase funding for parkway maintenance. But in addition to that, and again, this is so quietly done, we worked with the state. We worked with legislators, and Meg Forney worked on that quite a lot. I worked on that. There was no plan for. Remember, we talked about when you're maintaining something or when you're reconstructing it. Now you need capital dollars versus maintenance dollars to rebuild the parkways. Our parkways are 60 years old. There was no plan for that. And that was a ticking time bomb. We got through the legislature. We're factored into the transportation tax formula. We're going to be starting out getting $250,000 a year. We can amass dollars, and hopefully that number will go up. So to me, this is the kind of thing that I'm really proud of to have been part of. And we got an endowment. So we've been doing a lot of really good work, I feel the board has.
Good.
I know. And I just want to continue doing it, maybe for one more term.
So I'm going to ask you some questions about specific things going on. In my neck of the woods is the Hiawatha golf course. I feel like I don't hear as much about it these days, but it used to be a pretty prominent park board issue. Has that all been resolved? And maybe you could just recap what the issues are with it.
It was a hot topic, there's no question. And so it's in design right now. And it's following the adopted compromise plan, as it's known. So of course there were the competing interests in that space. As I see them, this is a historically important place to black golfers and the community that loves that in every way. And that matters to Minneapolitans. But then there was what I think of as a really unsustainable approach to land management. That's how I articulate it. We can get into the particulars of the groundwater and all of that. But the best way maybe for me to express it is to say, in my field, civil engineering, I've been in it since the last century. There are videos you can see, the Army Corps of Engineers, we're straightening the Mississippi River. No one tries to straighten the Mississippi River anymore, right? So we used to try to conquer nature. We can engineer our way out, right?
Well, that's what they're trying to do, because they pump a ton of water, more than they're allocated or supposed to be.
You can get into the details, but what I'm saying is it was an unsustainable approach to land management. We can conquer Mother Nature. She will bend to our will, and so we can golf here. Right. So that actually we know that you can't do that. So the water needs more room in that space, and water's coming from the storm sewer, basically, to a low point. But it's also coming from the creek. And we have soil data that shows that area has been a place where water accumulates for eons.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we can't, so for me, this is the thing. If there weren't these issues with trying to rectify previous mistakes that tried to control Mother Nature, if that wasn't a thing, I would never have supported changing that golf course location. It's too important to people. I don't need to enjoy every single space in the city. I'm not a golfer. But because of that other issue, I felt like that compromise plan was really the best thing we could do. So it's in design now. It's a golf-forward design. A golf designer's on the team and is also who maybe is also an African American or black golfer himself. I believe that's accurate, and has experience doing this kind of thing. And once the golf design settles, the water management will settle around that.
So it's going to be like kind of half golf course, half wetlands.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, one of my personal things that's come up this year that I just learned about is the dog park there in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
From my understanding, I guess the park board is there's not much they can do about it. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, yep, if you want to keep going.
Well, they're changing the fencing around. They're taking away some of the beaches, and a lot of people have taken their dogs there for a very long time are sort of upset about the changes. So.
And what I would say, from my point of view at this point, that work is on pause. And do you see there's a pun there? Pause? Get it?
Okay.
That's right. That's what we do at Cathy Abene for Parks. That's right. But I think there's a bit of a pause. So there is a dog park along that location, and it's beloved. Believe me, I've learned that. Again, I don't have a dog, but there are adjacent non-park board landowners there. National Park Service, the Historical Society, maybe the VA. It's not fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
Who've said, please control your land use, right? Some of this stuff just comes down to a land use. And so the park board was proceeding, but I think right now, like I said, I think it's on pause. If it comes back, and I'm not sure what's happening honestly with this issue, I'd like us to take a different approach to decision making on this one.
Okay.
I'm sensitive to the fact that also of the importance. There's what's it called? Clearwater Springs. Is that what it's called? It's Bedote, right? It's the Dakota, origin story, creation story space, Coldwater Springs, and there's some tension there about how that space should be treated. Okay. So let's have that conversation. So we'll see if it comes back. I think it could in a next term.
So another area where parks, played a prominent role this last year has been with shootings, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They had the one at Boom Island, and then they had to close down the parking lots at Bede-Makaska and maybe a couple other places. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. What's the future there? How do we? Because when you start on the park board, you probably don't think you're going to be managing crowd control and violence. So, what's the plan for the parks to manage those kind of things?
Yeah, I think one thing in general is that the park. We have our own park police. I'm sure you're aware of that. We also have park patrol agents, and then also in that public safety kind of branch of the park board's organization, they have the street reach team, community connections and violence interrupters. So there's kind of that pronged approach that I know people want in our city. But we have something like 35 sworn officers, and we have not expanded the capacity there. But some of the issues with hiring that the city's facing, we're facing as well. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the city's staffing of their police department has a direct impact because, the park police and the city police work together and they may help and respond to each other's calls and things like that. So our own patrolling or whatever ability is reduced and has been reduced and will continue to be reduced. So what I'd like to see is there are some places where I think we could benefit from deploying more technology. I think that we've had an experiment in Minneapolis to say, if we don't enforce things, what happens? And I think that we see that if you don't, sort of establish sort of some societal boundaries around behaviors or, legal or laws or whatever, that people will kind of push those boundaries to the point where I think problems occur. So what I think we can do, Boom Island to me is a great example. It's kind of off the beaten path. It has already a paid parking lot. I'd like to see a controlled entrance point where you pay, but you pay upon entry. You don't just pay at a pay station or whatever. And maybe a photograph is taken of your license plate so that you know that, hey, if I'm in here causing problems, I can be tracked. And maybe that's too big brother for some people, but I think we're headed to more technology solving some of these problems. And I think with more incentives to be law-abiding, I think people will make that choice. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then at Bedema-Casca, you can't. There's no controlled access point. You couldn't do something like that there. So I think more patrolling, doing some of the things that we tried this year, I think really helped. But it's a rowdy lake. I think Bedema-Casca gets more calls than any park in the system. Yep.
And that's just from people kind of pulling in with their cars and partying, or what is that?
It's always been, I think, a gathering place. And from speaking with the chief of police, the park police, he said it's just a historically rowdy location. I remember articles back in the day in the city pages of the Reader or whatever, when we had those two great local papers all the time talking about it. So, to me, I'm not interested. I have no interest to say that the people that live along or near Bedema-Casca are entitled to the same experience you might have living around Lake Harriet. If you live at, Bedema-Casca, it's a different vibe and a different energy. But I also think that I don't like to see teenagers shot in the leg either. So let's find the balance there. Yeah.
Well, I guess some people would say, too, that the parks are there to offer programming for youth. Do they have sort of like Friday night basketball, stuff like that?
They have everything. It's unbelievable. And what I think is really, I think there are these things that are theoretical in people's heads, but I think where it actually, where the rubber meets the road, if you're called to be a rec center worker, again, we have park professionals. If you're called in your, career to be a rec center worker, a rec center director, it means you want to connect with the community. Mm-hmm. And you understand that if you're a rec center worker in this location versus that location, your community's different. And it's really a priority of the organization, and I think the commissioners as well, to say, how do we tailor the what happens in all of these spaces to the community being served in that location? And so, yes, the park board takes very seriously, I think, its role in public safety. That's how I see it. In addition to youth programming, having engaged youth in our city, activated parks make a huge difference.
Yeah.
The other thing is we're the number one employer of youth in the city of Minneapolis.
Oh, didn't know that.
I know.
Yeah.
So again, sometimes I think it's, there's a lot that we have, a lot of rhetoric going around. And how do you get to what's actually true for the specific thing you're talking about or thinking about?
Well, so what's true about the mall, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned these plans. I forget what you call them.
The long-range plans or
long-range
master plans. Yep.
And my understanding at the mall is that it was maybe not as much input into the long-range plan for the mall as some people wanted, and people have different ideas that came up as to what should happen there. There's the opportunity to close the road and turn it into green space, mm-hmm. and a lot of people in the community rallied because they didn't want to do that. Am I close?
Yeah, I'd say that's close. I would say that's close. I think that's the common understanding or whatever. Okay, I will try to discuss this in a way that isn't too wonky. And, forgive me, I have to think about this in a way that's wonky. I'm a civil engineer. And so I would also compare the way that this process happened versus the way we would do it at the University of Minnesota, okay? So I have to think about that. So, for example, at the University of Minnesota, we would never impede emergency vehicle access. In fact, no idea would make it into a plan that does that. Mm-hmm. We have an adopted plan that closes roads. I know these weren't ultimately on the table for this work, but we have an adopted plan that closes the eastbound South Loop Road adjacent to 3 or 4 story pre-war buildings that don't have fire sprinklers. So as a civil engineer, if I said this in the right circles, if I had this conversation in the right circles, people's minds would be blown that that was even in an adopted plan because it's boneheaded.
Right.
Okay, so this is the problem. Sometimes, and I love the park board. I think you've heard me compliment the organization over and over again. When I say park board in this context, I mean, I love the commissioners too, but I mean the organization. But boy, they missed it on this one. So one of the reasons why I think that they missed it is, first of all, that mall plan was adopted in and among a plan for 45 parks or something like that for the whole South Service area. The park board does not have employed a civil engineer or a traffic engineer, and I think that's a problem personally. And I mean, I'm talking to them for a while, and I don't say hire one, but I think they would benefit from hiring one. And then if they had one, they should listen to that person.
Well, because you talked about the parkways. There's many miles of roads.
At the University of Minnesota, we have 2 water resources engineers on the Twin Cities campus, one at UMD, and on the Twin Cities campus, we also have a traffic engineer. And they don't have any of that at the park board. So maybe so people might watch this and be like, oh, she's so annoying. Look at her thinking so highly of her field. Well, yeah. So there's some expertise that's lacking there. And so putting that down in a plan to begin with was boneheaded, I feel. And I think it set a false expectation with the community. And so, but if you could drill a little deeper and say, when the plan was circulated, before it was put into the can, it was circulated. It was circulated to people that had some expertise, including the city engineer. And the city's only comment on the mall, other than pointing out a typo on that whole plan, when it got to the mall, it said road closures, something like road closures will need further discussion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, massive asterisks.
Right.
So what happened was, rightfully, that's a smart thing, because we have all these adopted plans, Centerpoint Energy, the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services approached the park board organization about ripping through the mall to put in a new sewer line. Good, we got to do that, no problem. Because they have all these adopted plans, as citizens, we should say, good job. They can pull that adopted plan off the shelf and say, what does it say here? Should they put it back as is, or are we putting a bench somewhere, or restoring it to native prairie grass, or putting in a swing set, or what are we doing in that space? And it said, lo and behold, it said, close the road. And so initially when this conversation started, they had it closing. The staff was proposing to close the roads next to the buildings. So honestly, without the actions of the commissioners, me, Elizabeth Schaefer, others, saying, pause, we got to talk to the fire marshal, we would have eventually been, I think, sued if we would have pursued it. Because in addition to ignoring that important asterisk on the plan from the traffic engineer, who was also speaking to traffic, there's actually a requirement in state statute that was not identified at all and is not a practice that the park board understands at all and knows about vacating streets. And so you can't just do these things. So again, when you're engaging with the community, you know there'll be some things that are obvious. And the park near me, Lyndhurst, is in design right now. They're getting a climbing boulder, right?
Oh, okay.
Pretty cool. Okay, yeah, they can plunk that there. But when you talk about pulling out roadways, you might be getting out ahead of your skis.
Right.
That's the problem with it. So here's what I would say that's a good thing that's come out of this. And I want to say 2 more things. One thing is, it's word on the street is that those buildings are being emptied by the owner of the buildings, that they're not being released or whatever. So perhaps it's a potential future development opportunity. So one of the things that I did is asked the head of planning at the park board to send an official letter to CPED at the city saying, hey, if these parcels come up for redevelopment in the future, do not consider the mall road the road that serves this. You will, if you need a fire lane on that side or a fire access on that side, you're going to have to plat that out of that parcel. Does that language make sense to you?
Yeah.
Or service those roads from the lagoon side. But you can't treat the mall road as a road.
So is the thinking that those, what are pre-war 3-story buildings going to be like torn down and
I
put
get
into a gigantic condo building?
I think that might be the ultimate. Maybe. I mean, I have no intelligence on this other than hearing from a few people that those buildings have been getting, at the U we call it decanted, which I think is a little pretentious, emptied. So, not released. So now the park board is on the record with the city saying, don't treat them all like a roadway for these parcels. So that's one thing. The other thing is this. I did attend meetings around that neighborhood area. I did go and listen and talk to people, and not all the commissioners did. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think maybe the commissioner of that district did, and I did, okay? And there were outraged, furious renters. Furious. So I have to say, I kind of am sensitive to what they were saying too. And if we're talking about, a city that is, listening to people or providing, housing for, income, a broad array of income levels and things like that. I don't know why we would harm the renters in that location. They felt harmed. That was my take.
Right.
So, but yeah.
So what's coming up for the for the commission? So this term would be for 4 years.
Yep.
What do you feel like you'd like people to know that you'll be supporting, or that's coming down the pike here in the next 4 years?
Yeah. So the board of whoever's elected to the next board will get to develop the strategic directions for the years 27 through 31, if my math is right. So we're going to finish out next year. We'll finish out the strategic directions that we developed in our first term. I personally have some things that I'm interested in seeing us do. Again, I talked about revenue. I'm interested in looking at understanding the economic impact of the park system on the city and the region. A couple weeks ago, I had invited the Meet Minneapolis, which is a tourism entity in the city, to come and present to the park board about how it uses the park system to, for marketing tourism, winter tourism, and other things.
And can I jump in on that? Is the idea that you want to show the economic contribution of the park so that you can go to the state and say, hey, you need to give us more money? We're contributing way more than we're getting back in the what is it called, the local government aid?
Yep,
right?
Local government aid or property taxes. So even at the local level, and certainly we need more local government aid. But I think that what I want to do is say, when you invest $1 in the park system, maybe you only get 75. Maybe it would show we only get 75 cents back. I doubt it. But maybe we get $5 back. And so if you have a public dollar to invest, do you want to invest it? And you're going to compete for that dollar. Do you want to invest it in the thing that gives you $5 more or not? So that's the kind of thing I want to start thinking about or focusing on in a next term. I think that the system, sometimes our rhetoric is so interesting to me. It's we could be focusing on things that I think really are more important. So anyway, that's one example. I think just keep doing some of these wonky things, depending, maybe I'd be interested in being the president again, to full disclosure, maybe for one more year, if the commissioners would have me. But if not, that's fine too. Mm-hmm. I have no interest in any other office, so park board this is it for me. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything you feel like we've missed that you wanted to say today? Before we maybe close out, but I want to make sure people know how to find out more information about you. You have a website, I'm guessing?
I do. Well, I think first thing I'd like to do is apologize to anyone that fell asleep. This is wonky stuff that I think about and focus on, but I think it's stuff that has substance. Mm-hmm. So I do have a website. It's my name. It's Cathy Abene. .com, and you can find me there. Through there you can also find there's an email address on there. You can reach out to me. I respond to emails. So if it's an email related to my campaign, if you could do that email address, but if it's related to something with the parks, you know, in my role as commissioner, you can go right to my park board email as well.
Do you get many emails from people like, why
Yeah.
isn't the grass mowed? Or what, you know, what sort of complaints or emails do you
Yeah.
get? Or hopefully you get a few that are like, hey, you guys are doing a great job.
There's some of those,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, people will voice their concerns or ask for things or wonder why. So the goal for me is to ask the organization to respond. I mean, there's some things that I need to intervene on, but it's a public service. It's a public organization. So if it's a routine question, the organization should have a routine way to respond. And they don't have to always say yes either. They can say no sometimes, and that's okay. That's all right. We'll all be okay if we hear no sometimes. And it might be based on priorities or resources and things like that. So, but yeah, I do get, I don't know how many emails I get, but I do try to respond. I miss some. I think about it sometimes, like Lucy and Ethel on the conveyor belt with the chocolates. Some of the chocolates get by unwrapped.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but I try to get most of them. So.
Well, good. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
I hope you can tell I like to talk about this stuff. So. Yeah.
Well, you know, people, I think you started by saying that, it seems like the park board doesn't get as much attention, but I feel like people care a lot about the parks.
They do.
And it may be one of those things where it's like they don't necessarily want to look under the hood. They just want to know things are running right.
Yes.
And it seems like they're going along pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the parks are amazing here. So.
That's right. All right. Thank you, Terry.
All right. Thank you.